Hey guys, this is Dawood from AutoMarketplace. Thanks for joining us. So today we're going to do something a bit different. We're actually going to share an article before we actually publish the article. And so the title of the article is Marblegate Wants to Know What NYC Taxi Medallions Are Worth. And so basically it's recently come to our attention that on September 28th, there's going to be an auction for taxi medallions. And so here's the link to, link to the auction site. It's being hosted by Maltz Auctions. So you can see 10 NYC tax medallions. You scroll down. It says 10 New York City tax medallions owned by 10 different parties. These are medallion numbers. And then they get into more details. And by the way, you can log in for free and view the documents. It doesn't cost you money to do that. So getting back to the article. So basically, we went to the taxi clubhouse yesterday. Sorry, I'm fidgeting right now. Okay. So basically went to the taxi clubhouse yesterday on basically near the intersection of 7th Avenue and West 22nd. We actually encourage everybody to go there. You actually can, when you Google taxi clubhouse or AutoMarketplace video, which Adrian did from our team, shows up. We think it's a really cool place if you want to relax, but if you want to find out more information about the industry, it's a really good gathering spot. And there's a lot of parking now. I think they added some new taxi stands and FHV stands in front. And also there's there's a stand, as Adrian overviewed in our video, also on 7th Avenue. So there's a lot of parking available in case that's something that worries you. So getting back to this. So it says yesterday, I went to a helpful info session at the Taxi Clubhouse, and it was hosted by a company called FieldPoint Servicing. And so FieldPoint, if you go to their website, basically what FieldPoint does is that, this sounds kind of very technical, but it provides loan portfolio solutions to large investment funds. And so as you can guess, and as we'll kind of give more details on how we concluded that we believe they're providing this service to Marblegate, because you have to remember Marblegate owns taxi medallions and they also own taxi medallion loans. So not the actual taxi medallion itself, but the loan that backs a taxi medallion. So that's important to note. So this is FieldPoint. That's who hosted this event. So we write, in this instance, it appears Marblegate Link De Palma Acquisition 1, LLC, has retained FieldPoint to help them sell 10 NYC taxi medallions, likely tied to medallion loans Marblegate controls. In other words, these medallions might be subject to a foreclosure where Marblegate effectively controls the taxi medallion via a loan. Based on our analysis, 3 of the 10 medallions being auctioned have active insurance, which are basically a proxy, in our opinion, for which of those medallions are actually being driven. And so how we concluded that is we downloaded the TLC's latest, these are the numbers of the 10 medallions that are being auctioned. And if you sort by TLC MED, which is medallion, we just went through this spreadsheet, 3 of them are active. And basically that means the 7 that are being auctioned are like effectively in storage or, inactive. So we think that's interesting. So it says, as we've covered previously, Marblegate, a prominent distressed investment firm, is actively attempting to publicly list its extensive taxi medallion related holdings, which consist of standalone taxi medallions, medallion loans, and we actually think a taxi management company or a taxi garage, which makes sense considering it seems like Marblegate's accumulated thousands of medallions and medallion loans. And by the way, before you go any further, I think it's great that Marblegate has invested in this industry. The industry desperately needed someone to make a bet on it. So we think it's just really positive that Marblegate is in this industry. So we're not trying to demonize them whatsoever. In fact, the opposite, if anything. So based on a March 6th article we did, which is about Marblegate basically trying to list its taxi medallion loan and medallion portfolio in this management company. We go over that. And so basically right now, and this can get very, very technical, and we have, I don't want to have a 30-minute, discussion here right now, or kind of a monologue about this. But if you read the article, basically, and getting back to why we think the Maltz auction is a Marblegate auction, is that according to the SEC filings for Marblegate's blank check company that it's basically merging with its Medallion holdings, look what we find. So if you go to the SEC filing, it says, whereas Marblegate Asset Management, Delaware Limited Liability Company, and a lot of technical, wording here. But this is what's important. It seems like Marblegate owns its Medallion assets in De Palma Acquisition 1 LLC, which, if we go back to the Maltz auction, guess who you have to write the $10,000 deposit to participate in the auction? Has to be written to De Palma Acquisition 1 LLC. So we actually think, although it's being marketed as 10 different parties, we actually think it's basically a Marblegate auction, but they own the loans. They might not actually own the medallions, and these are foreclosures. Again, just a guess, happy to be proven wrong, but we're trying our best to figure this out from the outside in. So going back to that article we did back in March, the reason it's called De Palma, by the way, just kind of trivia, is there was a very famous sitcom. Danny DeVito is in it, along with other famous actors. And he was, I guess, a taxi garage owner, and his name was Louis De Palma. So that's the genesis of that De Palma Acquisition Corp name. Okay, so going back to the article, we write, a successful listing of Marblegate's Medallion holdings will be a watershed moment for the NYC for hire transportation industry, and it will create a liquid, tradable benchmark for NYC taxi medallions. And that's the article we did. If successful, Marblegate's publicly traded taxi medallion holdings portfolio will likely cause hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, of investment inflows from institutional investors into the NYC TLC industry, which has other knock-on effects. For example, banks and other financial institutions will likely re-educate or educate themselves again, or educate themselves for the first time on the industry and be more comfortable lending to it. Now, you might say, well, what does that mean? Or what is the point I'm trying to make? And I think an interesting analogy to kind of understand the point that we're going to make, that I'm trying to make, is that imagine you wanted to buy a house, but no bank would give you a mortgage, or anybody a mortgage for that neighborhood, in New York. Let's say no bank wants to touch the Lower East Side of New York randomly. I'm just doing a hypothetical example. Think about what that does to the dynamic of price discovery and that market. Basically, the only people who can buy houses in that neighborhood are people with cash, and usually with large assets like a house or a car, or in this instance, a medallion. It's based on the availability of debt. That's how people buy these things. Most people, if you're buying even if you have the cash, but most people don't, if you have $2 million, you're probably not going to, you're probably not going to use the full $2 million of cash to buy a house. You'll probably put down $300,000-$400,000, get financing, use that money for other stuff, or invest in other things, because it also, you want to use your liquid cash for other stuff as well. So that's even another reason cash buyers, even that have the cash, don't want to spend the cash on one large asset. And so basically, that's what's happening in the medallion industry right now, is that there's very few institutions who are lending to the industry. And if no one is lending to the industry, it basically creates a very illiquid market and a very janky and weird market where the bid-ask spreads, meaning, what someone offers and what someone sells at, is very weird. Like, one transaction might be done at 200,000, another one might be done at 150,000. And, it's just a very weird market that gets created. So, and getting back to the auction itself, we write, in perhaps a preview of the future, and based on our discussions with tax medallion brokers, a handful of financial institutions, including potentially Marblegate itself, because remember, they're in this lending business, are willing to lend to successful bidders. And so based on my discussions with a field point representative who was at the taxi clubhouse yesterday. And again, I think he was just illustratively saying that this potentially could be available. So this is not a matter. This is not a fact. But he basically told me that there were lenders that were willing to lend to successful bidders with a 5-year term loan with a balloon payment after 5 years. That means at 9.5% based on a 20-year amortization schedule. And so what does that all mean? So it's probably best to actually show this via, Excel. And I just want to stress this is not investment advice, but this is simply illustrative math. So in this illustrative example, we said, let's say a medallion costs $200,000. Someone puts $40,000 down. The lender gives you $160,000, 20 years, 240 months, 9.5%. That's the monthly interest. There's actually an Excel formula that makes this mortgage math quite simple. Happy to share that with you. If you email us at info@automarketplace.com. So basically, if you do all of that math, it's about $1,500 a month. And so we showed this math. The loan starts at $160,000. That's the first payment. There's the interest portion, principal portion. And what we do is basically we make sure the math is done correctly. So 20 years from now, 2043, that is actually 20 years from now, it goes to zero. And the principal versus interest, that payment is more principal versus interest as 20 years goes by. However, the term of the loan is 5 years. So what that basically means, and you can see it says, end of year 1, it's down to 157,000, end of year 2, 154,000. And you can see that payment is getting more principal versus interest, but in the early years, it's a lot of interest. So in any case, at the end of 5 years, the expectation isn't that someone would pay like 140,000 in cash. Again, that's the assumption. The way most people think about it, that in 5 years, when the medallion industry recovers, when there's more lenders, that this will be refinanced. And then you start this again. Maybe someone, you do another 5-year loan based on a 20-year amort schedule or 15-year amort schedule, or, whatever the terms are. So that's how the math is. So for example, and, we hope we made this dynamic enough. If we made a mistake, please call us out. Let's say you put $20,000 down. And a lender accepts that. So 10% down on 200,000, we assume. So your payment goes up to that. And then, you follow that same math. Again, this is not investment advice, but that's the math. Now, what are these numbers? We think we want to highlight. So let's go back to the 40,000. We want to highlight something. So we speak to a lot of taxi medallion brokers and drivers. And so I got into a yellow cab yesterday, and he was renting a medallion. I had a very long discussion with him, and I've had these discussions for the last few months. And so what he says is he pays right now $900 a week to the garage for the car and the medallion. So for this exercise, I'm going to assume that if he just wanted to rent the medallion and bring his own car, it would be $600 a week for a 24/7 medallion. By the way, which is really a depressed price. That rental rate is probably going to go up, but we're going to just keep this for illustrative examples right now. So let's assume that it's $600 per week to rent a medallion. So times 52. That means that individual is paying about $31,000 for just the medallion. Again, we're stripping $300 for the vehicle and everything. Whether that's a fair or assumption, you let us know. So basically, every month, that driver is paying $2,600 to rent a medallion. And this is our point why this price is very interesting, if that's the math. If the driver can come up or get financing or come up with $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 even on a $200,000 medallion, the math just is screaming to buy the medallion. Again, not investment advice. I just want to stress that, not investment advice. But if the driver is anyways paying $2,600 a month to rent the medallion, why wouldn't he or she or they just buy it if they can get the financing and pay less and then actually own the medallion at the end? So we think that's kind of interesting math. And that's, we wanted to highlight that. Okay, to conclude the article, and you guys might have already kind of thought about this, is why is Marblegate only auctioning off 10 medallions if they own thousands of medallions and medallion loans? And so our guess, again, we don't know the specifics of this, but our guess is there's two main reasons. One, remember, the taxi medallion industry has been very distressed, deep distress. A lot of people have given up on it. But if you follow the industry like we do, we actually think it's an interesting market that's bottomed out. And I think it's going to recover, hopefully if, things like the Marblegate listing is successful, financial institutions start lending to the industry. So, okay, one reason they may only do 10 is they want to prove to investors, remember they're publicly listing their holdings, that demand exists for NYC taxi medallions and healthy demand. So if they achieve like 10 bids and it's a competitive auction process, that's very good evidence of there being an actual market for this. And I think they will be able to prove that. The second reason, which is equally important, if not as important, is they will use the winning bids to value their medallion portfolio when they come to the public markets. So for example, and these aren't, these are just hypothetical figures. That's why they're in brackets. Let's say Marblegate owns 1,000 taxi medallions outright and 3,000 medallion-backed loans. So if they achieve 200,000, they can go to the market and say, well, our 1,000 taxi medallions, if each of them is worth 200,000, is worth 200 million. And our 3,000 medallion-backed loans have a collateral value of 600 million. And I think that's a very good way to prove that. And so we're going to include this video summary here. We're going to include the relevant documents and links here. We encourage you to stop by the Taxi Clubhouse. Queens Medallion Leasing representatives are often there, so they know about this auction, and so it's helpful. Email us at info@automarketplace.com. We can try to help you answer questions. We also know a lot of medallion brokers we can connect you with. In any case, we think there's a really interesting auction coming up. We're going to track it. We're going to keep you up to date. We hope you found this interesting, and let us know any comments or thoughts in the description below. And thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.